To be here, and I am hoping that you are going to pick up some useful ideas about the 12 signs because they are so much more than most witches or magical folks use them for. So let me start by saying that, I'm Evo Dominguez Jr. You probably already knew that. I've written a bunch of books and I've got more on the way. I've been active in the community for a very long time. You're probably going to hear my dogs in the background periodically. Sorry, I can't do a whole lot about that. So let's talk about the 12 signs. Honestly, the first way I always like to think about them, because you have to remind yourself continuously, is that the 12 signs are the styles of wisdom and folly that human beings have. All the styles of wisdom and folly. They're like the 12 notes, the 12 sounds that represent the consciousness of all human beings. Oh man, my doggies are really going to go off. If you're going to, I'm going to have to tell them to shut up. I'll be right back. Sorry. Alrighty, I have bribed the dogs with cookies, so now everybody's going to be quiet. And captioning is not available here, but when it is uploaded to YouTube, there will be captioning there. So here's the thing with the 12 signs. Every one of the signs exists within you. Now, you may just think that, well, I've got my sun, my moon, my rising, yada, yada, if you have any familiarity with astrology. But really, in the same way that you can think of yourself as being out of the 4 elements plus spirit, you are also all 12 signs. You can think of that as different kinds of building blocks, and anything that exists in the physical world contains all 12. And depending upon where your sun or moon or other things are in your chart, some things are highlighted in a particular way, but that is the truth of it. You are all 12. And I'm going to bring up another thing. Chances are that if you are listening to this talk or are coming to this event, then you also are a practitioner of sorts. You work with energy, you work with consciousness, you try to manage your essence, manage your energy, which means that even though some things may be easier to reach for, all those things are within you, and it's simply a matter of calling upon them or bringing them forward in a big way. You are a witch or sorcerer, magician, or whatever you practitioner, whatever you call yourself, which means you have the capacity to, by will and by choice and intention and visualization, bring forth the qualities of each of the 12 signs within yourself. And for folks that are going like, I always have a hard time understanding why things are a certain way in astrology, I like to imagine the zodiac as being this large room or in a temple that has 12 beautifully intricate, beyond what humans can create, beautifully intricate stained glass windows. And if you look at that as an image in your mind of the 12 stained glass windows that represent the qualities, the properties, the preferences, the strengths and foibles of each of the signs, then when the sun is shining through one of the signs, that energy that is the sun, that is your spirit, that is the core of you, takes on the qualities of having gone through that window. And eventually that light hits the ground and is reflected, and you see the pattern. All right. So everything that is in your chart, all the planets, all the signs, as their light passes, metaphorical light, spiritual light, passes through these beautiful stained glass windows, they end up in you. So of course you have all 12 signs within you, even if it's a blank. Why? Because the universe is filled with ideas and energy and essence, and all of them are flowing through you. Now, some of them are easier to get to because you have something bright like the sun or the moon going through it, or like the rising sign, and I might get back to the in a minute. But in effect, you have all 12 within you, and as a witch or a sorcerer or a magician, you can summon and call forth each of those things. And that light moving across the floor of that temple from those stained glass windows Yeah, that's the way that what happens when you look at a chart, a birth chart, or a chart for transits or perfections or whatever. What you're looking at is the pattern of what happens when all that energy and information and beauty gets projected onto physical Earth, physical reality. Now, one of the things about the signs is that people will say, well, I'm not my sign at all, or I don't like something about my chart. Let's go with the I don't resemble my sign part. So I'm going to suggest that all of the qualities of a sign that you may read or learn about exist in you. Now, whether or not they are active, whether or not they are uh, in play, is a lot up to you. And also, a lot of times we discover that the things that we say that's not me really are you once you look at yourself with a little bit more objectivity. But be that as it may, all the things within you are every quality of the 12 signs. Now, let's talk about what it isn't. I'm going to suggest to you that when it comes to the chart for your birth or for any other thing that you're looking at, it is like looking at a sequenced genome. It is looking at your energy chromosomes, if you will. But here's what it's not. It does not reveal the nature of the spirit inhabiting that body and that chart. Period. It does not. Let me compare it to something else. All right, some of you are old enough, or actually it's made a comeback, that you've got this old vinyl record or you've got a CD, and you pop it into a portable little player, and the music sounds okay and you can recognize it, but it's not the greatest. It's a portable system. Fidelity's not great. Let's say we take the same LP or the same CD and pop it into remarkably well tricked out audiophile's dream of a sound system. What's going to happen is you'll recognize that it's the same music, but you're going to hear instruments that you have never actually noticed in the background, or the stereo separation will be amazing, or you'll be able to hear the music in a completely new way. So what's going on is the chart is like that CD or that vinyl LP, and your spirit is unique and different and will play that music. Or if you don't like the recording idea, think of it as a score of music. And any musician can play it a dozen different ways and add their own twist, their own interpretation to it. So what I'm going to encourage is that you don't consider yourself or your chart as limitation, but rather as useful information about tendencies, useful information about the perspectives that work the best for you on a regular basis. And because we are looking at folks here, and I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat as well, that are probably also accustomed to the idea of working with spirits or working with gods and goddesses or angels, or fill in the blank for Loas or Rishas, fill in the blank for whatever it is that you work with. And you may also believe, I certainly do, that pretty much if it exists in the physical world, it has spirit. Everything is alive in its own particular way. Everything has consciousness and spirit in its own way, down to the smallest little grain of sand and up to the largest structure of multiple galaxies when we look at the farthest views that we can see at this moment. So what am I going to say? Well, of course, the signs are also beings. You can't possibly have even if you don't believe that they pre-existed. We don't have to go to the origin story for it. Even if you don't believe that, for literally thousands of years, people have been dreaming of, talking about, debating, writing about, visualizing the things that are about the 12 signs. They exist at the same level as goddess and god forms. They exist as more than archetypes, but actual beings, because if you have a trace of animism in you, you're going to say, yeah, they have to be living things. Which means that You can also call upon the signs as if they were divine beings, which in my book they are, for their assistance. So, and that may be to resolve the things that are your stumbling blocks, or to amp up the things that are important to you, or to awaken things that are not your forte. So, for example, as you're probably aware, I've got a bunch of books, and I have this Witch's Sun Sign series that are in process right now. And guess what? I'm a Sag, and I have been summoning up my Virgo parts of me in a regular way to keep myself on the detail focused track that is necessary when you've got things that we are juggling in terms of details to move forward. So yes, I've lit candles to the Virgo consciousness within me. But you understand what I'm saying? You can work with these in the same way that you have worked with other kinds of spirits or thought forms or egregores or whichever words you'd like to use. Now I'm going to say something that will require your participation. Everybody has to read what they want about the signs, but then you have to start creating your own list of concepts, ideas, ways of how these things express in your own life to see how it actually played in you, because we're all unique. And that is essential for you to work with them and also to understand yourself well. I'm also going to say that you probably will encounter in herbalism, in talking about crystals, where people will assign different elements or planets or sometimes particular signs to specific things. I'm going to say you're going to go, well, they don't agree with each other sometimes. Sometimes so-and-so says this, and this, and so-and-so says, no, it's this, it's this. And they're all right or all wrong, depending upon your perspective. I prefer going with they're all right to a point. Hey, remember at the very beginning of this, I said how it's my belief, take that with a grain of salt, that if it exists in the physical world, then it contains all the things. It's got to have all the elements. It's got to have representation within of all the signs and all the planets and yada yada. And honestly, it's an extension of the idea of as above, so below. All right. So the large is mirrored in the small and vice versa. So we're going there, right? Okay. So everything that is written by an astrologer about what the signs are about, including me, has a particular axe to grind. And what is that particular axe? We come from cultures. We have families of origin. We have blind spots because of our politics or spiritual beliefs, so that everyone sees things the way that they see them. And the example I like to give, and this is the truth about the signs, is that if to get closer to the truth, you have to look at a wide range of descriptions by people from different cultures, from people from different ideas, and see what it is that you find as your complete truth, or as your bigger truth. Somebody was asking, I wonder if working with energy of a particular sign is similar to the practice of remediation when you have a planet that's detriment in its sign. Well, okay, so yes, and I'm going to say bring your magical chops with you. So, for example, if you look at my chart, some people would suddenly be shocked. They go, I've met this person. This can't be right, because I have 0 air in my chart. And you go, what? So here's the thing. Air is about what? Communication, thinking, ideas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And generally speaking, when I encounter somebody's chart that, like mine, has no air in it, I'm going to generally come down to 2 broad possible first choices, 2 first choices, and then stretch it outwards. So, for example, I could have been a person of very few words and be very solid and practical in some regards, not much with the Sag though. Or because I don't have any air in my chart in terms of planets in air signs, but I still have the houses. that correlate to those air signs. So the universe goes, I hate a vacuum. I really hate a vacuum. So suddenly I have an excess of air, and I'm the one that, and I've learned to be better about this over the years, where I will sit on my hands and bite my tongue or bite my cheek to make sure that I'm not talking too much and to make sure that everybody has space to talk, because the absolute lack of air in my chart actually generates an excess of air in my chart because there's nothing to mediate it or to remediate it. And that's one of the things. You have the capacity. So if you think, oh, I'm no good with fiery stuff because I don't have any fire in my chart, well, that's awesome. That means that you get to summon it in the way that you wish, and it has to come in a comely fashion in the way that you have asked it to be. So it really is a question of empowering yourself to look at it in different ways. And also, what one person thinks of as a detriment, or in the, like, for example, my moon is in Scorpio, which is considered to be a bad place for a Scorpio. It's in the fall. Oh, I'm going to say something that if you look, somebody spoke about ADHD for a second. I'm going to say, look at the accent, look at what's going on with Sag and Gemini in your chart, because there's often a connection there too, if that shows up in your life. But anyway, so it's said traditionally that Scorpio is a terrible place for the moon. You know, it could be. It could be. But one of the things about Scorpio moon is that it's in its fall. It's not happy there at all. It's in its detriment. Or it means that a full of himself fiery Sag like myself actually has to deal with emotions and actually has to delve deep into my own depths and look at my own hurt places and strong places and everything else. So I'm using my Scorpio moon to reveal those things that I must know. Whereas if I didn't work it, then it would actually be in its fall, would actually be problematic, because then it would make me obsess and dig in on things that I shouldn't, and make me prone to melancholy in a way that I'm not, because I work with it. In the same way that, and I'm sorry that the meme reality has made it turn into a bad word in some communities because it's been misused in others, but here we go. I'm still going to say shadow work used to be a really serious thing, and then it got memeified, and then now people make fun of it. But reality is that working with the shadow in the Jungian sense of the word is a big deal for most people involved in magic, whether they call it that, if they're going to be healthy and stick around for the long run. So what I'm going to suggest to you is that if there are things that feel like they're hurt places in your chart, then that's where a lot of growth and power is potentially existing in your chart. Hey, the other thing is, when we look at the 12 signs as 12 styles of consciousness, you begin to realize that you understand other people better and can speak to them in a way that makes sense to them and is useful when you know more about signs that are not your sun sign. You might want to start by learning about the other, whatever you are, water sign, air sign, earth sign, fire sign, whatever, because they're like your cousins, and you're like your first cousins energetically, and you can see how there's a root of connection between each of them. But then as you begin to branch out and learn about each of the signs, there's a piece of each of those signs that lives within you. And when you awaken that, you suddenly find that you can actually listen to people better and hear what they're trying to say, because you're stepping closer to their kind of consciousness, their way of appraising and valuing things in the world. So one of the things that happens as you learn more about the 12 signs is that you begin to understand other people and the world. And then suddenly, when you look at that herbal correspondence that says this is an herb of Aries, it actually means something to you, or this is a stone. Though I'm going to say something. Be mindful when you look at people's recommendations for herbs or for crystals or whatever, and say they're good for the following thing, yada yada. Okay, may be true, but there's different kinds of good. So for example, if sometimes I will recommend for somebody's after talking to them about at least the sun and moon, where's your sun and moon at? I will suggest things that are not actually strongly connected to their sign, but the one that's exactly opposite on the chart. Whatever the sign is that's on the opposite side of the chart is your counterbalance, and maybe what the person needs is more counterbalancing. But if the person isn't exhibiting or expressing enough of the energy of the signs that they are, the moon sign, sun sign, whatever, and I say, oh yeah, you need a booster shot here. If you're an Aries, here's an Aries thing that you should have. On the other hand, some other Aries, I may say, hey, you need some Libra energy to balance out all that Aries stuff. So here, take this instead. So it's much like remediation in the sense of there's the herbalism of more and there's the herbalism of less, or of balancing out. So there's a lot of possibilities there. Let's see. I'm gonna also try and look at the crystals things. And oh, somebody says if we don't have certain elements in our chart or a lack of it, it means we've mastered another lifetime. You know, that may be true or it may not be true. I can tell I've done some past life work, and I can say that I've had lives where I've been pretty mundane and pretty boring. I mean, I had a life in Ireland, you know, I was basically a cobbler and lived in a village and didn't do a whole lot. And then I remember other lifetimes where I've been other things. So I'm going to say maybe, but that's going to be on a case by case basis. Because remember, from my perspective, you know, you're born into a particular life because you've made the choices to be there, and your chart is reflective of some of the. It's your crib notes for why you chose this incarnation, if you want to think of it that way. And if you don't think you choose your incarnation, then you can say, hey, then somebody guided me in this direction because this life was a useful learning experience. I'm gonna say that it's too individual to make a blanket statement about that particular case. So a lot of times, I'm going to say something about being fatalistic and then saying you're not. We're not. Sometimes people will use the information that they find out about their sign or signs after they look up their big three or more about their chart, and then they'll use it as a source for an infinite supply of rationalization for all the things that they can't do because it's just in their nature. I don't believe that for one moment. But it's a very common problem, whether it's astrology or other systems, to make it part of your defense system against personal growth. So I'm going to ask yourself, just ask yourself, am I doing this as an excuse, or am I doing this to better understand myself so I can move through and grow? And I'm also looking, somebody's asking about ground crosses and difficulty and awareness and yada, yada. I'm going to actually say this, and I've read a lot of people's charts over the years, and the people that have the most difficult charts are also in the same category of the people that manage to get the most wonderful ride out of this thing that we call an incarnation or a life. You know, it's the difficulties, it's the divine discontent, it's the itch that needs to be scratched, it's the friction where you find the rough spot on the wood and you have to go back and smooth it until it shines and is beautiful. It's polishing the gem. And sometimes if we have a chart where there are not enough stressful moments in it, then the person might have a vacation life or I'm taking a nap life where they're not moving forward all that much in that life, or not. Once again, their spirit may have other purposes for them, but it is valuable to recognize that if it looks like a difficult thing, hey, I don't know anybody who ever developed more strength or flexibility in their physical body without having to exert effort and endure discomfort. And I think the same is true when we look at the 12 signs as guidance. Well, I'm looking and it's 12:25. I'm going to look at the questions for a moment and see if there's something I want to quickly respond to. You know, if I'll give you this, how about if I give a simple advice about whatever? I'm going to use the sun sign because it's easiest for this one. And I'll do very simple advice. So I'm a Sagittarius, and I get a lot more done than most Sages do. And people actually go, "Oh my God." They look at my chart and they go, "You've got a ton of planets in Sag. How can you possibly get things done?" And I go, "Well, because I choose to lean towards the next sign. What's the sign that comes after Sag as we go through the solar year, as we go through think of the 12 signs as also being a different take on the wheel of the year. It is another way of describing the change of energy as we go through the year. So when I try to behave like a Capricorn, which is the sign that's coming next after me, I focus on planning. I focus on trying to see what it will accomplish. Scorpio is the sign that was immediately behind me. So when I start indulging myself, almost all the bad Sag things or Sag falling back into Scorpio behaviors. Do you understand what I'm saying? You can become too full of yourself. You can become too focused on yourself and not the outside world, yada, yada. And each of the signs, look to the sign in front of you. That's where your good behavior lies. And clock yourself and check yourself before you wreck yourself when you start behaving like the sign previous to you. It's a very simple thing to do. Very simple thing to do. You can do the same with your moon and rising, but it's a little bit more complicated. Let's see. Yeah, think of the signs as the wheel of the year. It is 12 different kinds of seasons, and it marks seasonal changes. I mean, you've got solstices and equinoxes are anchoring points, and then you've got the middle points of the fixed signs. But yeah, it is a powerful way to work it. And in fact, we've created rituals where instead of creating sacred space in calling the quarters of the other things people do, we've actually called the 12 signs as we walk around the circle as a way of inviting their presence and their energy and their wisdom into the circle. Let me see what other questions are formulating. Yeah, I mean, before people tell you that astrology is terribly complicated, and it is, and it takes a lifetime to learn it, it is. I'm going to say you don't need to be an astrologer, but it's valuable. I'm going to say you need to, but it's valuable to know enough astrology so that you can apply it to your own energy or apply it to your own work or apply it to looking at how the correspondences are for plant or crystal or other materials that you work with. So don't give up. You don't have to do the stuff the astrologers want. You just have to learn the parts that matter to you for your work. The signs' energies affect our behaviors, intensities, also our thoughts. Yeah, I like to think it this way. Think of the sun for a moment, the physical sun in heavens right now, and how it acts as the anchoring point because of its gravity and strength that makes the planet stay in particular boundaries around it. Your sun sign basically pulls you again and again and again to do particular things or explore particular things. But you're still continuing on a journey that doesn't repeat ever, just as the solar system is continuously moving. Okay. Just so you know, the Witch's Sun Sign books, our first one came out, Aries. Basically, the clock has started, and once a month, one of those books is going to drop. I don't have the months in my head this moment, though we can look that up. And people ask, well, okay, yes, get your sun sign. There will be value in getting your moon sign and your rising sign as well, but decide that after you've read the first one. That's your sun sign. And it's not a bad idea if you have significant others or close people in your life that you're trying to understand to buy their sun sign just so that you get a clue about who they are. And I think actually that was the amount of time we had designated for this. Yes. Hey, if you don't know what your birth time is, but you've got a range, if somebody's asking about, I don't know what my birth time is. Nowadays, with the magic of programs that can run your chart, if they can narrow it down to a range, run a bunch of charts like half an hour apart or 15 minutes apart, and then play 20 questions and see which sign, which rising matches it after you read the descriptions, which life events if you crank back the clock. So you can actually figure out your birth time pretty closely by doing a bunch of charts and then asking a lot of questions. So you might need help from somebody who's well versed in astrology for that. This feels weird because normally I do classes that are like 2 hours, 3 hours long, but I think it was useful within the span of time we had. Growing up, my sign was conditioned to be repressed. A lot of us have experienced that, and part of the personal liberation process is discovering who you are and reclaiming it. And this gives you other tools to try exactly that. Oh, thanks, folks. I'm seeing a lot of thanks on the thing. And for those that are worried about me because I had a health scare recently, I'm doing good, and I'm just waiting for my final meeting with my surgeon to say everything's fine now. Should women put special study into their moon sign? I'm going to say no. There's a traditional astrology thing where, and this, remember how I said astrology is shaped by culture? So, for example, when I was being taught astrology in the 80s, it was like, oh yeah, look at somebody's moon for their mom in their chart and Saturn for their father in the chart. And I said no because I'm queer. And I said, oh, who was their authority figure when they were growing up? That's going to be the Saturn person in the chart. Who was the most connected to them emotionally? That's going to be the moon one in their chart. So I think gender and gender roles and parenting roles, and it's all cultural stuff when you apply it to astrology. So you need to know more than, the moon is not always female. Somebody's going, born an hour and a half before the sun went into Taurus. Should I be making significance to Taurus? Yeah, if you're close to of moving from one sign to another, I don't believe in the cusp thing. You're not both signs at once, but you are in the last degrees of a sign, which means it is completing its process. So that's a different thing. Okay, we got to end the broadcast because I'm now officially almost 3 minutes over.